Okay, welcome back everybody to our technical tracks now. So we have two tracks in parallel again. On this stage, we have Matthew Moser, who's going to be giving us a great presentation on R155, informed authoring of cybersecurity test plans. Matthew works on composition and development of numerous software tools to provide greater utility for client-focused TARAs as part of itemis Secure. In addition to his software development responsibilities, he functions as a customer success manager and onboarding point of contact for itemis, clients based in the United States. Uh, Matthew, the stage is all yours.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen here. Give me just 1 second to do that. It's going to show my desktop for a second, but I'm just pulling up my PowerPoint itself. Okay, so let me go and hide this as well. So, okay, everything should be all good. So yes, hi everybody, my name is Matthew Moser. I am a software engineer over at itemis. Today I'm going to be talking about R155, informed authoring of cybersecurity test plans. This was a collaborative process between myself, my colleagues Bastian Kruk, Rohit Trey, and others from Keysight and Blackstone, or Keysight and Block Harbor. In this webinar, we're going to discuss two challenges that face R155 validation and verification testing, and I have a proposed machine-readable format solution for this to help deal with the challenges that are a part of this. So looking into the ISO SAE 21434, Tier 1 and Tier 2 manufacturers, as well as OEMs, will be facing these two challenges, and it's something that we need to look at the entirety of Clause 9 in order to fully understand the problem. So taking a look at Clause 9 itself and the relationship between requirements and their subsequent deliverables, we can see that the item definition is foundational to this entire concept phase of the product lifecycle. We can also infer by the inclusion of cybersecurity as part of the concept phase for the product that the methodology for R155 is following a sort of like measure twice, cut once logic. So it's very important that cybersecurity is considered within the very foundational construction and conceptualization of the product. This is quite helpful for protecting both stakeholders and customers, as potentially disastrous flaws can be detected and even mitigated before production of the product even begins, which this, of course, can come with the downside of making the conceptualization of products a bit more complex and process-driven, but the benefits of this type of approach are well worth the effort. And when discussing Clause 9, it's best to focus on cybersecurity goals as well as cybersecurity concept, or Team A and Team B, respectively. And it's important to recognize that these are two separate teams that, while they are working towards the same goal, they're ultimately in a disconnected environment. So we're going to have to have some way of transferring the cybersecurity goals and cybersecurity claims that Team A generates over to Team B. And that could be a different set of people on the other side of the planet. So it's really critical that information between these two are able to transfer over without any sort of information loss. Going over the TARA process briefly, this is the section on the left is the item definition. Here we can see that this is all of the physical or even just logistical aspects of the product. It includes function, data, components, channel, data flows, etc. The top row here that we can see is taking those assets that were defined within the item definition and then applying security properties for ISO 21434. The standard is the CIA triad. This creates security objectives as well as damage scenarios should the security objective fail, which then gives us an impact rating for given categories. And then we could determine what would actually be the end effect on the road user should a damage scenario come to fruition. After this, we can move on to the threat analysis portion of the TARA. And here we're able to see the same item definition being used, but now we're kind of doing an inverse of the identifying damage scenarios, where now we're thinking like an attacker, and we're trying to consider how threats are created within our system, vulnerabilities, and how they could be mitigated through the use of controls. And the ultimate sort of goal of this step is to determine the attack feasibility, or just the chances of this type of attack being successful within a real world situation. The final step of the TARA process is calculating the risk level. And this is just a combination of the impact level and the attack feasibility level to give the security analyst a quantitative understanding of how much risk there is for a certain type of attack within their system. It's important to know that this process is quite long, and it's even more important to know that this process is going to be a continual iterative process. With these new standards, TARAs are going to be updated for at least 15 years of the product's life cycle. That's always subject to change within the future, but at least at the moment, 15 years is sort of the number that's being considered for this. So when we're looking at how to handle TARAs, there's typically one standard way that a lot of OEMs, tier 1s and tier 2s will handle this, and that is through the use of spreadsheets. This is the default way that most will choose to handle the TARA process. And here we can see the component section of the item definition for a lane keeping assistance system. And if we were to try to cross compare this to the other aspects of the item definition, including functions, data, channels, etc., this is going to be a pretty mentally laborious process, as well as it's going to be very difficult to update this later on down the line. So when you have different parts of your system that either change due to components being modified or swapped out with different ones, or threats becoming more or less feasible, there's going to be a lot of backtracking through these sheets in order to update it. And this is a process that's going to take over 15 years to complete. This is something that is, again, pretty laborious, very abstract in terms of actually understanding everything that's within the system. And it can also make just understanding what a TARA itself is a bit more difficult. So for the sake of making 9.3 and 9.4 of Clause 9 more understandable for this presentation, I'm going to be showing using a program that we have here at itemis and that we've developed called Security Analysts to just show a model-based approach to this sort of thing, because this will make the OpenXAM format a bit more understandable. So this is a model-based approach, and here we can see the exact same item definition within Security Analysts as opposed to a spreadsheet-based solution. And as you can immediately see, using a model-based approach to TARAs allow much more information to be shown and connected within a single visual. In fact, we could see every single aspect of our item definition within here, including components, data flows, channels, etc. It supports the complete creation and completion of TARAs, and it is something that Team A could use to fulfill all their deliverables that are required for the team, and then you can export that information over to Team B so that R155 validation, testing, and verification can also occur. As part of completing a TARA, cybersecurity goals and claims will be made, and while that's good to have, that isn't enough, as we were seeing in our image earlier. You need to be able to validate and verify them through a testing suite as part of R155. And that leads us to the second challenge, being R155 validation verification. So there are a wide array of stakeholders that have interest in providing accurate and fully detailed information. These include OEMs, tier 1, tier 2 manufacturers, the security analysts, the TARA authors themselves, as well as the test authors. there are three sort of expected deliverables as part of this, being the item definition, which we just discussed, the cybersecurity goals and concepts, which is part of Team A. And with this information, Team B will be able to actually work on their own testing suite and be able to provide the validation and verification, which is sort of the stamp of approval on this Clause 9 being passed, at least internally. So what we've sort of created here is a machine readable format, and it is focusing on three sort of core principles, those being importing, authoring, and then finally reporting the results. Importing the information really focuses on being able to take that information from machine to machine, and it's of extreme importance when working in a collaborative but disconnected environment. So in order to make this process easier, the format that we've chosen really does just focus on machine readability. It is the type of information that just needs to be correct from device to device. And it's particularly important because if Team B has incorrect information, and this was just a simple error of the transfer from computer to computer, that's going to mean that all of their validation and verification status testing doesn't matter because there was something lost in translation, and that means that all the tests are going to have to be redone, just because even if a single component is missing, it invalidates any sort of results that you get from the test, and you need to go back and redo the thing from scratch, which obviously loses time and loses money. So it's important to make sure that any sort of transfer of knowledge or data is correct the first time, and that's why we've gone with the machine readable format. The second pillar is authoring, and this involves the security tester interacting with the data present in the model and then creating their own tests. So it's not enough to be able to just have the information. The person doing the R155 testing needs to be able to actually interact with that as well. This is an iterative process that must allow for modifications and additions in order for the person doing validation testing to actually be able to determine if everything is working as intended, or if there are any possible ways that a mitigation simply isn't working, or if there needs to be additional work done by Team A. Additionally, alongside the general authoring of being able to interact, this would include accountability and be able to track who is making changes to what, and even who is validating and verifying these tests. And this would just allow for greater accountability in terms of deliverables and just how teams are able to designate the work of a project and monitor their progress as a team. And then the final pillar that we had when creating this format was reporting the results. And this is arguably one of the most important aspects of this, because if you do all the work, but you aren't able to report it or show it to any sort of compliance bodies within any sort of reasonable way, your work doesn't really matter. So this step is demonstrated both concern and actual risks that stakeholders are exposed to within the project. And this allows for informed changes to be made within the product cybersecurity suite in order to reach those deadlines. So by using the actual reports here at the end, we're able to see if any changes need to be made within our system, if validation or verification tests did not pass. So that would be ways so we can actually quantitatively prove that, yes, we have done our work, it's within our system, and we've been able to verify and validate that our cybersecurity tests, or our cybersecurity suite rather, is working as intended. So for the structure of this, we first start with our, we have three sort of parent elements within here. And the first one is the item definition. And this contains all the data related to the architecture of the analyzed system. This section in particular relates to Team A and is obviously the foundational step for performing Atara. Functions, components, stored data, etc. can all be found here. The verification and validation status can also be viewed as a property of this element, but I want to be clear that verification validation status is added post Team B. So the structure that we're looking at is all the information regarding Clause 9 and R155 testing once it's completed. So this would not normally be there, but it's just a way that now that all the testing's done, we can see that if verification and validation status as a whole have been passed for the system, that's something that's very easy to access and is even just first present within this. But again, test B would need to complete that, or team B would need to complete that. Moving on to the second node, it is the security analysis, which holds all the risk found within the product and the controls that are implemented to negate them. This element is really only focused on those two properties, but considering the complexity some products have in terms of how many risks are being considered or just how large the project is, this section can become increasingly large itself. So it scales in terms of the complexity that you have for the product you're testing. And the information found within this aspect is created during the TARA process. So this is, again, a Team A requirement and deliverable that Team B needs to receive without any sort of information modification or information loss. And it's only focused on the overall risk level calculation as well as how the controls have been placed. So it's important to note that with this, we're not trying to demonstrate how risk levels were calculated within this aspect, only using the final calculation as intelligence to support future decision making. If concerns were to be raised about how those calculations were created or the methodologies, they could be tracked back to the TARA, and it would be Team A's responsibility to provide the full report and their rationale. Otherwise, at least as far as Team B is concerned, they only need to know the sort of end results of their calculations. And then the last node is the security concept. It stores information regarding goals and cybersecurity requirements. Goals are defined as cybersecurity objectives, and the passing of their validation and verification are what the security analyst is trying to achieve in exploring ways to implement controls into the product. Security requirements are outlined specifications from an external governing body that must be passed for the product to be sold on the market. So there's a bit of a difference between what those two function as, but they're both important to pass in order to be able to sell your product. The information provided in this aspect of the structure is designed to provide a sort of quick checklist view of goals and requirements with, and quickly allow for testing statuses to be viewed. This is ultimately what Team B is going to be delivering once they've completed their work. And it's going to be the information that's of interest both for internal security and as well as that governing body regulatory, so you're able to sell your product at market. The structure that I showed today is a work in progress as part of a collaboration between itemis, Block Harbor, and Keysight. And it will likely need tweaks to fit the needs of stakeholders. And in fact, that's something we're very much open to and encouraging. But the utility of a standardized and well-documented format for the distribution of R155 testing data is already present within the system. Through further collaboration with the cybersecurity community and stakeholders, a more refined structure can be created and additional needs or requirements can be met. We really are looking to provide a sort of general solution for moving information from Team A, being the team that's creating the cybersecurity goals, to Team B, who are the ones doing the validation and verification testing. It's a type of situation in which making sure that no information is lost and information isn't unnecessarily modified between either an Excel-based approach or a model-based approach between these teams is of critical importance, just because whenever the Team B is just entirely reliant on the information provided from Team A, and any sort of unintended change in that information is going to set back the entire project until Team B realizes that's occurred and then are able to actually get the correct information. So it's of critical importance, and that's kind of why we collectively looked at providing a solution for that transfer of knowledge. That completes my presentation. I'm good to open a 5-minute question period, and then I will also be in the lounges later on for networking.
I think, sorry, is everybody able to hear me? Matthew, are you able to hear me?
We're able to hear you now.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you for that presentation. So I think we have some questions coming in, and that's definitely generated a lot of questions in my mind as well. So let me start sharing the questions. So the first question comes from Glenn Bikini. So it is, where is the 15-year lifetime of a HARA defined?
So that should be within clause 9 itself. I would have to look back at the specific documentation. This workflow that's being shown here is just sort of a document that we created to understand what the deliverables are of that. But in clause 9 itself, it should be defined there. And this is, again, going to be a 15-year process. You're going to have to continue to update it. But clause 9, I believe, is where that is. If that's not the case, I'll be able to track it down and provide that as well. But at least off the top of my head, it is in clause 9.
Okay. The next question comes from Yusuf from Japan. So how many functions or assets that we need to define and verify in order to achieve the verification marks of the regulation?
I suppose I'm a little bit confused as to what you mean by functions. Is that referring to the item definition itself, or is that referring to something else?
Maybe we can ask Yusuf to come on stage and he can clarify. So I've just sent him an invite to come on stage. Okay,
Yeah.
Yusuf, so you can clarify the question.
Oh yeah, sorry. Basically, the function meant the inside of our system itself. There's kind of like a function block or maybe a asset inside the system. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that what kind of asset that we need to define and how we should verify it in order to achieve those verification mark from the regulation itself. Because I see that there's kind of like there's no defined way on how to say that this is actually up to standard, or this is how we define that this is actually achieve the goal for the regulation. So how do we define those in order to achieve those verification marks there? Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So at least when it comes down to those function areas or even components with your item definition, you need to just make sure that anything that your product is able to do or has physically within its boundaries is fully defined. That's something that is a bit of just the expectation there. You're not going to be leaving anything out. And then when it comes to the cybersecurity goals itself, that's something that is going to be created as part of your risk treatment decision. So when you complete the TARA, you'll have your risk levels and you'll be able to see what threats need to be mitigated as they provide simply too much of a negative effect on your customers. And then with the risk treatment decisions that you make regarding that, you'll have the goals that are focused on reducing the risks, and then you'll have the claims, which are retained risk due to just an acceptance of this is something that's within our system. This is something that is just unfortunately something that's going to have to be there. In fact, some types of attacks are simply going to be there because you have components within your system that are IoT devices. These will then create the controls, which you'll need to verify and validate, which is just making sure that everything within your system that is set to negate those are functioning properly and will provide the benefit that your TARA team is claiming that it will, as well as the goals, which are the cybersecurity and operational requirements, which that is your governing bodies. So anything that would prevent you from selling your product at market, typically a government body, they have their own set of requirements, and you would be doing validation and verification testing for that. So it's a sort of two-pronged approach where one is making sure that you're doing your work in terms of controls are working as expected. And then the other is, can I sell my product at market? And you're trying to make sure that, yes, you can sell that. And that would be based off of, at least in this example, ISO 21434 requirements. But if there's another set of requirements by a different governing body, you would be shifting your testing to meet those.
Great. Great.
Okay. Thank you so much for the clarification. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. So we have more questions coming in. Lots of questions. So this one is from John. Can this be used to track the effectiveness of controls in a system over time?
Yes, this is something that could potentially be done for that. You would mostly be looking at least in its current draft, the statuses of the validation and verification testing. If you were looking to track the effectiveness of controls over time, I would probably focus more on Team A's deliverables. So within the TARA itself, you could look at the same sort of attack and compile the quantitative risk that's it's accrued and compare it over time. And depending on how you would choose to handle that, be it a Excel-based or model-based approach, that would change your methodology. But I would probably look more so at Team A's deliverables to meet that. But if you're looking in terms of, does it meet our final testing, you could use Team B's results for that as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, so next question. So in addition to the 15-year question, does this also mean that a vehicle must be supported with security patches for 15 years?
That is likely going to be the case depending on the type of vehicle. If it's something like, I'm going to say an autonomous driving vehicle, it's something that's already being done and something that's already being patched on. I believe Tesla has like weekly patches, or put out 52 patches within a year for one of their vehicles last year. So it is likely that you may need to provide those patches for it, but depending on what's within your device, it may not be necessary, and you may just need to demonstrate that you've seen the risk change, you've been able to modify things that need it, but there might be some risks that, yes, they go up, but they're not enough to warrant a patch yet at this point, or the damage that's caused by a hacker doing it really is so insignificant that it's just not needed. So it really, I guess, would say it depends on what the functions are for your vehicle and what risks are changed.
Great. Okay. Thank you. And the next question comes from Chandra. Does scalability factor hold any significance in TARA, and how to represent the final ratings?
So yes, scalability does present a massive component of TARAs. You need to be able to make sure that you can handle the scope from a single ECU within your vehicle to the entire vehicle itself. That's one thing that we were looking at when we came to the creation of the format. And that's why we chose to really have just the essentials when it comes down to the actual export for Team B from Team A. We're just trying to make sure that all of the necessary information is there so that the Team B doesn't have to wade through anything that isn't relevant to them in terms of what they're trying to accomplish. So we are keeping scalability in mind, and with the TARA process, you are looking to do the same, because you're going to have to be doing this process over a long period of time. And especially as the product grows in complexity, both from just the initial scope of the product to the final one, you're going to want to be concerned with how can we scale up this product, or how could we even scale down should certain risks just become non-threats because we found a way to completely mitigate a type of attack. That, of course, is always going to depend on how the landscape of cybersecurity moves in the future and how different attacks come into the spotlight and certain attacks leave. But scalability is something you're always going to want to be concerned when it comes to cybersecurity in general.
So maybe just a quick follow up on this from my side. So, I mean, you're using this to transfer information from team A to team B, as you said, as you referenced in your presentation. But could it also be going from like a higher tier to a lower tier, right? And from that point of view, what is the direction in which you're moving towards pushing this in some sort of a standard which is more widely adopted across the industry, right? Rather than, I mean, of course, you have a consortium of itemis, Block Harbor, and Keysight, which is doing this, but are you planning to expand this, beyond the scope of that to maybe more industry-wide information exchange consortium?
Yeah, that's sort of the end target goal that we're looking for. We would like wide adoption of this, and we're really just looking to fit the needs of the community. So if there are changes that need to be made to make this transfer of information easier from, say, even tier ones to tier twos, if you're looking to do larger scopes of products, or even if you have multiple teams doing multiple TARAs as well as multiple teams doing verification and validation testing, we're looking to make it as accessible as possible and something that is just adopted by the industry and becomes a sort of, I guess, a standard solution for this, and just a very easy way to transfer this information that isn't sort of restricted by other sorts of solutions.
Great. Well, thank you, Matthew. So we're running a little short on time now, but like Matthew said, so he will be available in the networking lounge. We have a dedicated table for speakers, so there's a dedicated table for stage one. Uh, Please do join him there for any follow-up questions. I think questions are still coming in, which we couldn't get to. Yeah, thank you for the interesting talk and a very engaging Q&A session. Um, just so after this, after a quick 5-minute break, we will have the rump session. If anybody in the audience wants to give a 1-minute shout out to a cool project or something that they're working on in automotive security, please use the rump session. It's meant for the audience to come on stage and present their ideas and thoughts and cool projects, right? So yeah, see you all there in about 5 minutes. Thanks, Matthew.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, everyone.